Thank you for. Now, I think Noah's going to have some questions for me. Is that right, from chat?
So a first question friends are raising has to do with your use of the word reverence. One question that speaks to this: how is reverence different from prayer? Could you speak a little more about reverence?
Yes. Well, I think reverence is sort of, hopefully it's the nature of prayer. If you come into prayer really angry, there may not be a lot of reverence to it. But prayer is essentially entering into spiritual dialogue with the divine, is my understanding. And so it is an act of communication, whereas reverence is going to be the tone, hopefully that communication is happening within. And it might be the communication, might be the tone of the communication that you are in with another person. Now, there is a tendency, and I have trouble for saying this, but there is a tendency among people in their early spiritual development that when trouble, they say, oh, Big Daddy God, who I have seen through the pictures of Michelangelo as this big white guy up on a cloud, and he is completely separate from me, and he is in charge of the ultimate landlord. He owns and runs everything. I know nothing, and I am separate from him, and I hand all my troubles over to him because I know nothing. Now, that's a very traditional place to be. There's lots of traditions from lots of religions that speak to that. I tell you right now, I don't like it. What I want to understand is that we are, each of us, all of us, the fingers and the breath of the divine. And that when trouble comes, instead of saying, I know nothing, I can't do anything about this, I hand it over to you because I am nothing. What I want to say is, need to be seen, learning about this. Why it's been presented to me? And what would you like me to understand about this trouble? I understand that I am part of the divine. I am an aspect of the divine. I am the fingers and the breath of the divine here on planet Earth, and you want me to do, our dear friend Bill Kreidler would say. We're going to do what? So sometimes people don't like the idea as reverence as something that is employed and consciously and deliberately used. But that is my understanding of it, and that's not might be part of my imperfection. Yes.
There are a number of questions about the experience of discovering a gift of healing or of exercising that gift. Some friends are asking, how would I know if this was a gift that was being given through me? Or what does it feel like? What advice might there be to people who wonder if they might be called into a ministry of healing?
Well, I think that the gift of healing, the various gifts of healing, are much more common than people think they are. And one of the difficulties is the noise of our culture, popular American culture. God help us. Put your television in the attic and handwrite a letter by candlelight, for God's sake. The world is much too busy. We are much too overscheduled. If you, anyway, to any extent, organize this, do, and when you find that you have less schedule, your capacity to sink down to the seed during meeting for work. Jesus did not go out into the desert to get a suntan. He had to get away from all the noise of the world and hear the messages given him. It was a very particular practice. He would do some large work and they'd say, okay, folks, back into the desert. We have got to sort of rebalance here in our place in the world. So I think gifts of healing are actually fairly common, but you need a lot of quiet. You need a lot of space. You know, I am not on committees. I am not busy doing a lot of things for a lot of people in the regular way. I need a lot of nothing in order for the messages to come through me. Now, that might be because I'm just thick as a brick. I was doing massage for a year. People's pain was passing out of me for a year before I said to myself, well, maybe this isn't Swedish massage. You know, maybe my hands are getting so hot that they're peeling because this is a spiritual experience. Oh, I said to myself. So if you are sensing some intuition about how it is you should be in the world, get yourself some big quiet, get yourself less busy in the world, and listen closely. I'll tell you one story about, who's the wonderful Canadian Quaker woman whose obituary was just in the Friends Journal, Anne, up in Nova Scotia. Thinking her name in a minute. Former clerk of Canadian Yearly Meeting. Anne would go with her father to the mental asylum on Sundays to visit who had no visitors. And when she was 13, she said to her father, how come when we go to see Harry, I get a pain in my chest? And her father said, well, that's because we have a spiritual gift in our family and you now have it. When we feel a pain in our chest when we're with someone, it means we're with someone who needs heart surgery and we have to get them to a doctor. And so I will have to tell Henry's doctors here at the asylum that he needs to be checked out. Many years later, Ann Thomas is going to the butcher to get a turkey for her Canadian Thanksgiving. And she gets a pain in her chest and she looks at the butcher. And he's sweating profusely, he's huffing and puffing, and he looks like he's gonna keel over. And she says to herself, how the hell am I gonna get this guy to the doctor? And so she says, oh, I think I'm sick. You have to take me to the emergency room right now. I'm going to die. And again, says, I actually feel better, but you have a pain in your chest, don't you? Yes, he says, I do. Triple bypass. Right that moment, she got a free turkey every Thanksgiving. That's a great Quaker story. It might be that you have a gift that you need more quiet to understand. So get yourself some big quiet and follow your intuition and ask them. Ask your angels, your tutors, whoever it is, however it is you understand the universe is organized, ask them to show you what you need to know next.
Thank you. We have a number of questions about your reflections on caring for ourselves in relation to how we serve in the world, how we're engaged in wider work. Could you say a little more about how to know that balance between caring for yourself,
yes,
and engaging more widely in the world?
Read my first book. Yes, The Dance Between Hope and Fear lists all of those disciplines. You know, people feel badly when they make mistakes when they're out in the world being of service. In my 8 years of traveling in the ministry, I have made, I think, probably a mistake that could be made, some of them quite embarrassing. Now, if you learn from those and you know more, and you have some more grace around that particular issue, hooray, you can do more work, you can go longer. Now, I came to a place in my AIDS work where I was getting other people's migraines and depression and all the horrible illnesses that people would have. I would experience their pain. And I had to isolate myself. And the healer that I was tutoring with at the time said, you have to stop work for a month. You have to stop work for a whole month. You go to everyone you're working with and you say, I'll see you in 30 days. I was having to learn how to say no to people. And after that, when I re-entered into the work, I could see where I was offering myself too much. And so I began to offer myself less. And by offering myself less, it meant that I could go longer without becoming exhausted. There was a point in my work, 1990, the winter of 89, 90, I made 30 trips around the country to work with groups. And a lot of the work that I did in addition to that was helping people to die in hospitals with AIDS in Washington, D.C. There were memorials I couldn't go to because I had too many people I was working with in hospital. And I became thoroughly exhausted. And Marshall, my dear husband, Marshall Brewer, said, well, he has to go rest. Let's say he's going to Pendle Hill. Let's tell him to Pendle Hill to write a book. Term of 1990, I went to Pendle Hill and I slept about 10 hours a night, had a morning nap and an afternoon nap. And then after about 5 weeks, I began laughing spontaneously about nothing in particular. And then I was ready to go back to work. We each of us have to understand where it is we need to unplug and what capacity of work we have to do. And you really should read my first book. It tells you all of it.
Thank you, John. We have a question from Jorge Luis Peña, joining us from Cuba. I'll read it first in Spanish. En mi experiencia como escritor para niños, he trabajado en la interpretación contemporánea de los cuentos clásicos. En ellos siempre hay monstruos y a veces es difícil dejarlos fuera. ¿Por qué ocurre que la bondad y el amor parecen siempre figuras débiles a la hora de ver las luchas de roles? In my experience as a writer for children, I've worked in the contemporary interpretation of classic stories. In them, there are always monsters, and sometimes it's difficult to leave them out. Why does it happen that kindness and love always appear to be weak figures at the moment of seeing the struggles of roles in these stories?
It's the patriarchy. It's men. Yes, men help us. Now, trouble is heaven sent. Trouble is for learning. If we has parts and pieces to it, and we can understand where the handles are in the box, or how this thing is constructed, or on, or where it comes from, then we can turn that to knowledge and wisdom and understanding. The difficulty is that monsters are so scary. And the other difficulty, and this is the really ultimate spiritual lesson of all, we must so personally. What an impossibility. We just dropped this brick on my foot and I'm bleeding all over the place, and I mustn't take it so personally. It didn't happen. It doesn't feel that way. Honest, it is. It's what's going on right now. And if you can step back from your personal response from it, you can understand how this is organized. And when you have pain, do you have mercy for yourself? Do you, when you stub your toe, do you get angry at your toe? Do you have mercy for yourself? Where have you been taught mercy? For yourself, for others. The more mercy you have for yourself, the more you're going to have for other people. When are you merciful to yourself? When is the opportunity to do that? You have a voice in your head not to be kind to yourself? Whose voice is that? Turn down the volume on that voice. Put that voice in a cheap seat in the back. Yes. The monsters are a necessary part of learning. Just want to see if once in a while we can get them lined up and take them one at a time, if possible. I've made naps. Yes, so we can lay it down. Yes.
We have a number of questions about saying no in meetings where there's disruption or conflict or harm.
Yes.
Can you say a little more about how a meeting that was facing a challenge like that might begin?
Well, you know, if you think, when I was a teacher, we would have a hyperactive kid, a learning disabled kid, emotionally disturbed kid, and you can have a certain percentage of that in your classroom with a strong teacher, maybe an aide, and still have things cook well, still have learning going on for everyone. Now, if your percentage of that channel is too large, then the classroom is going to be disrupted. If there's not enough support, if there's too much disruption, then you're in trouble. And the same is true in a meeting. Now, if you have a nice old meeting in a nice old meeting house where the reverence tone has been set for decades, you can have someone go off the wall and not making sense and distributing a great deal of pain and confusion all over the place. And the meeting can prayer with. Now, if you have a meeting that's not well grounded and if you have too much disruption going on, then you have a problem. Then it's off balance. There was a circumstance, I was in a meeting out west where on the one hand, there was someone who would go off meds and would become a ranter. His responsibility to be able to be understood and to leave people in quiet most of the time. Now, the meeting could have held that except for the fact that there was someone dying in that meeting. And she came to the meeting for worship because it was the most holy and reverent place that she could be, her experience of dying. But she could not do, so the ranter had to be stopped. That's a fairly clear circumstance where someone has to be held to their responsibility to other people in the meeting. So, you know, if you're reluctant to be saying no to someone, I just have to say, butch up and face it straight on.
We have a number of questions about the long arc of ministry. Wondering if the long arc of ministry of your many years of service.
Yes.
Could you share a little bit about knowing that there have been a variety of forums that your ministry has been supported? Is there anything you might want to reflect on in terms of how that support has happened? What some of the challenges have been? Any lessons you might offer for friends in terms of understanding support of ministry by community?
Yeah. Long-term support. Well, you know, the beginning of my work, I worked invitation, and I was primarily supported by gift. Sometimes I was paid. This is the 13th plenary I've given to a yearly meeting. I've gone shop all of the Quaker conference centers and some of the Quaker colleges, and sometimes I am paid for my work. Most often what happens is someone sees my work, who witnesses it, and they understand that this work should be supported financially. And so for now, I have worked primarily by invitation, and I have lived primarily on gifts of support. Now, I do not recommend this for anyone. There are many times I had to choose between snow tires and dental work. It is not an easy way to live. But I will tell you that for someone who wants to brave that suspense and is not scared by financial challenges, that it can and even affection in a way that is clearly tested. I'm in a circumstance now where I will probably be able to live on the gifts that are given me now, even though I'm not out in the world being of service to individuals and groups, because people understand that I still need their help. I also want to say that there is when people see something that they understand to be credible. Part of my ministry is to be able to help people to trust spiritual life, to trust that there is that they themselves are an aspect of the divine, that there are ways that they can fusion in their pain and understand their place in the world better. Now, people are doing this as nurses, people are doing this as psychotherapists. There are all kinds of ways in which people are doing this and gaining people's trust because of it. So ministry is really very much widespread, and long-term support is possible. And it may be possible in a very orthodox way, as being a friend or taking a job with a Quaker organization, or it might be that if you don't want to be any, that you can go and build something on your own and have other people help you build it also. Yes. There is support for good work out in the world. There is support for it. Yes.
There are a number of friends who are sharing very tenderly about feeling in a place of despair, with the depth and the enormity of grief. Wonder
Yeah.
if there would be words you could share to speak to that.
I was at the co-op the other day, and there was a baby who was crying. And without even thinking about it, I said, "That's right, darling, you let it go," because we all feel that way. And there were a lot of people in the co-op kind of surprised about that. There is a lot of despair in the world. There is trouble in the world. There is so much pain, and so much of the pain looks impossible. I just want to tell you that in my heart of hearts, from my whole life, I believe that everything can be healed. Not by me, not today, but everything can be healed. If you can get yourself some quiet, get yourself some safety, get yourself some time where you are not too busy and taking on too many of the monsters, then there's the possibility you can have some space. Now, despair is a thing that is very interesting instruction. It is part exhaustion, which Quakers are famous for. It is part and having enough quiet and enough stillness. It is also being around people giving negative messages, which is simply slumming. And we either have to remove ourselves from that or to tell people to stop it. We have to do something so there's not quite so much of that going on. If you're hanging out with a lot of hopelessness, you're going to absorb it. You know, I always tell people that I love the singing of Barbra Streisand, but, you know, she's singing these incredibly sad songs. Oh, my man, I love him so, he'll never know. Well, what the hell good is that? A man who's never going to know how much you love him. For God's sakes, don't be hanging around hopeless people. You want to go in to minister to them? Fine. But don't be hanging around that stuff, slumming. And what are you spending your time with? What are the colors you're surrounding yourselves with? What's the music you're listening to? What are the people you're surrounding? All things are messages that you're sending to yourself about how you feel about being in the world. And if you are sending yourself good messages, the world is hard but beautiful, be here. Now that's a message that will get you down the road. The despair is something which we can disassemble. And you might not be able to take it apart today, and you might not be able to understand how it's all constructed in any way right away. But I want to tell you, everything can be healed, and you want to be hanging around those people and those messages and those institutions which are going to help in yourself. Don't think something can't be done. Don't you be thinking something can't be washed and cleaned and held up. Some things you have to let go because we don't know how to do it right now. Might understand it later on. Might be decades later. But everything can be healed.
There's so much gratitude being shared in the messages.
Thank you. It's lovely to be with you all. One more question.
What message might you have for New England friends gathered for these sessions, facing the condition of the world, reflecting on our own leadings and our own life? Is there a message or a prayer you might offer for us?
My dears, we are waking up to how big a mess we're in. And we are in a big mess. Politically, the climate, the justice system, the racism, the violence, the culture of rape. Any direction you look in, any direction, there's going to be too much to do. And you all want to get on it now. And you're going to turn to other friends and you're going to say, this is the important one we have to get on right now. But there are 24 or 500 of these things that have to get done right now. Hunger in America, homelessness, the way vets are treated, the way the economy is based on war. Oh my God. My dears, I want you to settle in and find someplace to do some good work. And don't be afraid of the world falling apart, because under the guidance of people, the world has been falling apart for a very long time. And now it looks like it's terminal. But I don't believe that. I don't believe it's terminal. I believe there are good people doing good work in many places. The meeting is working very hard. The meeting has worked very hard to be awake and to learn and to know things. And of course it feels like too much. Of course it does. Paying attention. Oh my God. Do you know why Quakers are such a small group of people in the world? Because it's a hell of a lot of work. You can see I didn't curse there, which was very good of me. It's a lot of work being a Quaker because we want to be awake. We want to know what's going on. And of course, it's going to feel like too much. We are in a time where it's either going to turn to light or it's all going to go into the toilet. And friends around the world are working hard to make sure it's going to go towards the light. Yes. So I ask you, please, to be tender with yourselves. I ask you, please, not to overwork. I ask you, please, to be able to hear one another, at least with respect, if not with your heart. And understand that we can hold trouble for a long time without figuring it out. Each of us have troubles in our lives that we just haven't a clue about what to do about it right now. It's okay, we don't have to figure it out right now. And we can look at it, we can understand it, we can puzzle it, we can apologize for not knowing what to do, and we can do the things that we do know about so that it's not lying entirely still. But please don't give up. If friends are feeling overwhelming because the process feels too slow, and it always feels too slow, take yourself to the outer rims of Quakerism. If the struggle is feeling like too much in the center, it is. It's okay. Go to the edges. If you want to come back into the center and struggle, you can do that. All this work goes on. It's all going on. Do you know, there was a time back in the 70s when a New England Yearly Meeting began to discuss treating gay people as full human beings. And some of our more conservative friends in New England Yearly Meeting said, no, we cannot discuss this. It is against the Bible and we will not have this conversation. And we decided to have a meeting to talk about why we couldn't talk about it. And I was at that meeting, and there was a wonderful old Quaker there. I'm forgetting his first name, Mr. Brill, who had been the treasurer of NUIM for many years. And he took me aside and he said, well, John, we're going to just have to wait for some of these diehards to die. It may not be a Quaker sentiment, but it's true. We can't figure out everything right now. And some things are going to be figured out later on. And it doesn't mean that you stop breathing in the meantime. No. Take good and tender care of yourself and the people around you. Do the work that you can do. If you're bleeding, it means you've been working too much. You need to back up a little bit. As I said, we don't honor anyone with our suffering. We honor people by carrying the light. Thank you very much. And it has been wonderful to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I'm so deeply grateful for your presence and ministry with us tonight. And I want to share on behalf of myself and so many friends in the chat and the whole yearly meeting that we are holding you and Marshall in the light for your well-being, for your health, for your peace and joy.
Thank you.
Let's settle into a few moments. There'll be a couple of announcements about a further opportunity in a moment. Let's settle into some worship, gratitude,